be a citizen. I don't even think citizenship is in their minds when they come here across the border. I have a hard time believing it would be. So some sort of an adjudicated sentencing or adjudicated, or giving them the deferred sentence or deferred adjudication for a year, 2 years, whatever the case might be. After which time they have the opportunity to be here legally, not citizens, but some sort of. I think that recognizes the issue. It doesn't give amnesty, but it also doesn't treat them all like they're a bunch of common thugs when what they really are, people here providing workforce.
We have their names on the Social Security roll. Social Security knows all of the illegal funding.
Well, many times they have different Social Security numbers than who they really are, and that's...
Oh, absolutely. But they still know. Social Security knows, because they don't pay out a benefit to these people come retirement day. Those monies stay in the coffers of our government.
So let's go to food stamps.
That's a tough one.
Because John brings up another important point. And by the way, anything more that you want to address
So
on that?
you're not supporting any pathway to citizenship, even like the Senate version, the 12-year, they have to pass background checks.
Well, here's my problem with the Senate bill is it doesn't acknowledge that they've committed a crime.
Sure.
And see, that's a bit of a problem for me, because we would never do that for an American citizen. Not acknowledge. So that's my problem. Would I be open at some point if they paid their debt to society, whatever that is, whether, again, a punishment that fits the crime, perhaps, but I think it's too early to talk about their citizenship. I want to make them legally here first, and then perhaps, but, so I think that's going to be part of the, by the way, that doesn't even recognize, we haven't even talked about the Cramer issue, the children issue. I will tell you, this is a real dilemma within the Republican conference. There are people that say, in our conference, and I cringe sometimes, but we just say, no, if we allow children, even if they were born here, to be, different than their parents, then we're just going to have a bunch of people coming here having babies. You know what? Compliance with the law doesn't demand a cop on every person. So I just think it's unfortunate to sort of punish children. I think we have to find a better solution than that. I think we're a nation not only of laws and of immigrants, we're a nation of compassion as well, and I think that's got to be part of the reform.
Do you think about all the people, though, that I have a friend that's been trying to go through this process for about 15 years?
Yeah.
From Germany.
Yeah.
So why does the government always think they can pick winners and losers? Why does the government think that there's millions of people that have legally been trying to go through the process to get here, and somebody walks across the border or flies across, like you said, we're giving them a special deal?
Yeah, that's why I
don't.
don't.
All the other million people.
See, that's why I wouldn't. See, our problem. That's why I see we have a legal immigration problem in our system that's as big as our illegal immigration problem. There's no reason we can't be more efficient and compassionate and proper on the legal side. That's got to be. That's an important part of it. I will tell you, in terms of the casework, one of the most satisfying things that's ever happened to me was. Oh, I'm not told this story publicly before. Sorry. I was at the state track meet, in the high school state track meet in Bismarck, and this woman came up to me just all giddy and sort of teary, and she said, Congressman, you did our family the greatest favor in the world. And I said, well, what's that? She said, you helped our daughter become an American citizen. And I remembered the case. She told me her name. I remembered the case because it was a very unusual case. It was a girl who came here as a toddler. In fact, as an infant, adopted, was abused by the adoptive parents, never became a citizen, was readopted by this family as a toddler, and she was running in the state track meet. This beautiful little dark-skinned girl with legs about this round and ran like a deer, and I looked at her and said, "Well, 17-year-old girl graduating in a week later," and her mom said, "Would you ever allow us to take a picture of you with her?" Would I allow you to? Would you allow me to? Those are, but it raises your point. How does a situation like this not get resolved before this? Right. You know how long it took me? I sent an email, and within 2 hours she was granted citizenship.
It should be that simple, though, really.
It should be, but it shouldn't have to require a member of Congress to do it. It should have been done by our, the immigration folks 13 or 14 years
That's the
earlier.
rogue bureaucracies we have in this
That's the
country.
road, that's the whole.
No offense, but
And
you
in
don't
this
run the
state-
country, the bureaucracies
You
run our
don't
country.
know,
In
it's
this
worse than
state,
that.
our bureaucrats are against us. You would think they were from Russia.
It's worse than that.
It's unreal.
We can get into litigation as the new method of policy making too. But, okay, I want to get to food stamps because you raised this issue and how many, because we have this farm bill situation, right? And you read in Fargo Forum and other places about how bad Republicans are on the farm bill. Let me tell you about the farm bill. For decades, the farm bill has been passed, and I have no problem with this, but as a coalition bill between
City
liberals,
people and-
who support enhanced food stamps, and red state folks who support agriculture. And that coalition is how they've been able for decades, every 5 or 6 years, to pass a farm bill. Because you had a bunch of people who represent folks who eat food and have no idea where it comes from, and a bunch of people who grow it, and and separately they could never make for 51%, but together they did. Okay, that strategy worked for years. What's happened in the last 5 years, ironically, is the number of people on food stamps and the amount of money spent on food stamps has more than doubled. Now, people will say to me, but Congressman, that's because our country has gone, we can't create enough jobs for them. Well, guess what? Poverty went up 16% at the same time as food stamps went up over 100%. Why did that happen? Well, there's a couple of reasons for it. One was most of it goes really back to 1996, and you all remember welfare reform when Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton, after sending welfare reform 4 times to Clinton's desk, he finally signed it. One of the big compromises in welfare reform is while we put work requirements on TANF and all these other programs, the compromise was that with regard to food stamps, we would create what's called eligibility. Anyway, what it did is it made everybody who's on any program eligible for food stamps. Any program, at any level, state, local, whatever.
Any federal program? State program?
It could even be a state-run program, but it's a federal program. I'll give you an example. LIHEAP, Low Income Heating Assistance Program.
Yeah.
So what was happening, and it happens to this day, is you have some states, like say in the South, where you don't need a lot of home heating assistance. We'll give a family $1 a month in heating assistance, and for that they get several $100s in food stamps. And by the way, this categorical eligibility, every state has different standards. They have different benchmarks. So it's grossly inconsistent how it's administered. So that's one reason for the more than double. The other reason for it is that, is in the last few years, in the last 5 years, is the administration has put in a incentive program for bureaucrats to get more people on food stamps.
Well, he also signed a deal taking away the work requirements.
Well, and that's the other thing. So there was this work requirement. He did an executive order, which he had the right to do. That's again part of the compromise, to do away with the work requirement. So what happened is you have bureaucrats out there getting bonuses for getting more people on food stamps, and you have no requirement except you get $1 from for some other assistance program. Therein lies there's more incentive not to work than there is to work. And think of how disappointed Theodore Roosevelt would be. And so what our bill did, and that didn't pass, and this is very important to understand. When the Farm Bill came out of the committee and went to the floor of the House, it had lots of things in it that are very, by the way, the House Farm Bill is far superior to the Senate. The House Farm Bill is far superior to the Senate Farm Bill. Heidi here is the tracker for the Democrats. So we love her. This is all part of the accountability structure, and I'm glad to have her here.
Thank you.
We like Heidi a lot. You know what happened? This I really thought, but last election, the Democrat tracker, there was a guy named Jake, and I see him around the Capitol a lot now in Washington. They become like children to us. We end up spending so much more time with them than we do with our own kids. But anyway, so in the Farm Bill, the Farm Bill had a lot of things in it, including some reforms for food stamps. One of them doing away with the categorical qualification. And by the way, the qualifications are not that onerous. The federal qualifications are not that onerous. The other thing we did is there was a little amendment we put in at the end of the floor debate. There were, by the way, 103 amendments that were discussed. That's how the House works. The House is a very deliberative body. 103 floor amendments. There were over 100 amendments in the committee that were discussed and voted on. We debated and voted on 103 on the floor. And one of the amendments was this: that if you are to receive food stamps, if you are able-bodied adult with no dependent children, you had to do one of three things: be looking for a job, be training for a job, or have a job. Now, does that sound like a really heavy burden? And for that reason, only 24 Democrats voted for the Farm Bill. Nancy Pelosi voted against the Farm Bill. Against it. Eric Cantor voted for the Farm Bill. Make no mistake, the Farm Forum is wrong about this topic. Eric Cantor and John Boehner voted for this bipartisan Farm Bill. Nancy Pelosi tried to get every Democrat to vote against it. 24 hung in there with us. And 172 Republicans. It wasn't enough. To get support for the Farm Bill, Eric Cantor said, let's split the two. Because a lot of people have wanted to do this, including a lot of farmers have wanted to do this for decades. Because what's happened to the Farm Bill is it's no longer a 50-50 deal.
It's a social welfare program.
It's 88% food stamps.
Absolutely.
Our farmers have continuously given up more and more support over the years, rightfully so, understandably so. Whereas the other piece is grow and grow. So it's now 88%. So they said, let's separate the two and have a transparent debate about both. The same exact Farm Bill passed without the food stamp portion, and next week we'll take up the food stamp portion. And when it passes, and whether it does or doesn't, it'll go to conference committee. But here's, so when you hear about all this negativity, oh, by the way, the new Farm Bill that we passed, no Democrats, 0 Democrats voted for the Farm Bill that passed the House of Representatives. It passed with all Republican votes. So when you wonder about who's for the farmer, don't be confused by this.
Sure.
Don't let the Forum Editorial Board dictate that we understand this. Okay, so that's what's going to happen. It'll all get put back together, and there won't be the severe cuts, but there'll be some reforms. There'll be some reforms to food stamps. So that's the food stamp issue. I want to get back to immigration for 1 minute, and then I don't know how we're doing on time because we want to honor your time. We're coming up to the end. And
I took a day off, cost me $500, and drove 2 hours on my bike in the rain to be here. So I don't
thanks.
care if
So
I'm
you
here
don't go
all
if you go a
day.
little long. Yeah, I do because but anyway, this issue of immigration reform, by the way, does raise another point. And I look to Rich because he's the expert on this. We picked, what happened? I saw him just now sort of. He has had a stroke, so I just want.
That's all right, Jake.
Are you okay? You sure?
Yep.
Okay. You sure? Watch him closely. You don't want.
Farm Bill,
In education.
education.
See, we have a mismatch. Because why is it that we have to bring a bunch? Why is it that we have to have such a liberal? By the way, we have the most liberal, immigration policy in the world.
Sure.
We bring in 1 million a year. It's not like we're not generous. And so, how is it that we are spending so much on education that we have out of control, in my view, out of control education?
You're right on.
Pricing and education is much like healthcare in that there's too much third-party involvement, and consequently the inflation exceeds normal inflation. But how is it that we're doing such a great job educating, but yet we have all these people in this country that don't have work, and so we have to bring other people in to do even unskilled work? That doesn't make sense to me. So we passed 2 things. We passed the Skills Act, which is aimed right at vocational technical education and making sure that it is more appropriately. They will give more local control, consolidate programs, not cut, by the way, but consolidate programs and put more control in education, especially vocational technical education, in the hands of employers. Secondly, we passed the almost universally applauded Student Success Act for K through 12. In giving local control and state control to people like Rich Wardner, who know what's best at the local level, and I've received tremendous support from the education organizations in North Dakota and around the country. The problem is the Senate has passed neither one, or even haven't gotten out of Harry Reid's top drawer. Imagine that.
Sitting on that.
Okay, so we are up on an hour, but is there one other thing that I haven't touched that we're just, yes?
He brought up Social Security.
Okay.
Two things to make it more solid. I've had a couple of people tell me.
Two things to make it more solid.
If we raise the cap,
Okay.
like a tax, it's currently at 113.7.
It is?
And I worked 42 years in the field, so I've
Sure.
watched this very closely. In 1997 was 65.4. So in 1997 it was 65,400. So when you're above the cap, they're not taxed at all.
Right.
They said, well, I've been told that solvency would be there for X number of years if they just opened the cap.
I think that's probably true. Here's what I would say. On Social Security is, insolvency is quite a ways off.
Correct.
That said, the longer we wait to work with it and fix it, the more dramatic and painful a fix will be. So you're saying, let's look at it, and I'm with you.
Okay.
Right now. So what are some of the solutions to make sure that we increase it from 20 or 30 years to 40 or 50 years? And one of them might be that. That's not my favorite one. But I think we have to acknowledge a couple of things. One thing that we have to acknowledge is that we're productive a lot longer. So, and we have seen an increase in the age eligibility, right? First thing we have to do is make sure that we don't do anything to people currently on Social Security or those that are going to be soon on Social Security, because that's not fair to them. That's changing in midstream. So let's deal further out, and we have that luxury. And yours is one possibility. It may even be the case. To me, that's a bit of a tax increase on productive side of society. It could have some negative impacts. I do think certainly, I think some means testing is appropriate, frankly. I think that Social Security is a tax, and so if we had some means testing, I think I'm open to discussing that. The president wants to do change CPI. That's been met with a lot of resistance. And then I do think, increasing the age slightly over time, I think is fine as well. So I think actually Social Security is a fairly easy fix. But you guys, it takes political courage. I'm running the risk of just saying this in front of a Democrat camera. Hey, let's talk about this, because they will come back and see he wants to cut you poor old people out of the
Right, so
system.
as I worked, I was near the cap many times. I can't even remember if I made over the cap, maybe a couple times. But as it raised from 97 to 13, from 65 to 4, I paid it in every time. Every time.
Yeah.
And then some people get to a point where they don't have to pay.
Right.
And my other point of it is I was arguing with the farmer. I have a lot of farmer friends, by the way.
Farmers hardly ever argue.
No, but he says to me, well, I don't care, I don't need Social Security. But he said, because then I said, well, how much did you pay in last year? Well, I was going to pay in, but I did my farm planning and I bought 2 new combines, and now my adjusted gross income dropped. I didn't pay any Social Security. So when he's mad, then he doesn't get a Social Security check. It's really because he wasn't capping it, or he. Right. That's why his Social Security is less than what, say, a wage earner.
Sure.
That's why I said raise the cap.
Yeah, sure. I think that's one of, like I said, 3 or 4, and I think that reasonable people sitting around the table having coffee probably could come to some. But you guys, right now, that's the other issue. The political issue, the parallels.
But what? Social Security was never meant to be for full-time retirement. It was subsidized, isn't it? And what happened to Social Security, in my humble opinion, is that it became a social welfare program. Every drug addict, every Joe Blow that said he had a bad back ends up on Social Security disability. That should all be a separate program. I poured concrete for 23 years. I've had back surgery, knee surgery, and shoulder surgery. And I've never missed a day of work in 3 years with the company I'm working for right now. And I don't think it should be raised, because I was responsible and I've saved my money, and next year in February I might be able to retire at 55, and it isn't because of Social Security, because I can't collect Social Security.
Right.
Why should I be punished? It was never meant that.
I don't think you would be punished. Yeah, I don't see you
At
being punished.
62, or who knows what they're gonna raise it to, 67, 70, I have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think, that's why, I mean, I think you have to draw real delineation, and there has to be an acknowledgement that we live longer,
And that's where the reform could come in, the issues he's talking, could be
Right.
reform, but the
Yes.
payroll tax wouldn't be there, and his should be there, and if he's
Right.
paying the
That's
cap,
right.
he
That's
will,
right.
that'd be like saying, I'm gonna get the social, but I don't want it. I'll give it back. Well, I guarantee you, when you get that age and it comes in, you're gonna cash
I'll
it.
bet that farmer regretted that statement.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, sir.
Just
Then we're
one
gonna wrap up,
fact
because I wanna honor you
that our
guys.
public doesn't know. I spent some time selling a lot of annuities to wealthy people coming out of the northeast of Florida. I lived in Florida 25 years and I built a nice business. But I learned
But you
something.
retired here?
No, I've never retired.
Oh, good for you, okay.
I'm 75 years old and I'll work till I'm 100 or however God leads me here. I do land work for a company. I make sure that the farmer and the rancher that owns those minerals are as happy with the deal as the oil company.
Boy, there you go.
Okay?
That's a noble call.
Yes.
Yeah.
My point is on health insurance, and the Supreme Court rightfully made it undressed. It is a tax. Accidents in automobiles accounts for 80% of health care yearly throughout the United States. If we had a need for all the sick people that you would think that this president and Obamacare says we have, we would have 8 hospitals just in Dickinson alone. And in the big cities, every 6 blocks, they would have a hospital. It is such a monumental tax on the people of our country that built our country that it's sinful.
So we'll end where we started.
It needs to be stopped.
I just wanna say one thing.
Yes, John.
It sounds like that I'm against you or something, and 100% I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy in the whole world that you're my congressman. I'm terribly unhappy with Mr. Hogan and Ms. Heitkamp. 100%. Probably the only thing I ever agreed with Ms. Heitkamp was she actually voted for the Constitution and the Second Amendment. Other than that, she doesn't do much else that I think's any good for this state. So 85% of the time I do agree with you. I don't try to be disrespectful to you at all. But when I see there's an issue that I think, especially when it's constitutional.
Right.
Because the Constitution was made this greatest country on earth, and it's destroying it right now because we're not abiding by the Constitution.
You know, it's funny, John, one of the amusing things these days is that, you know, this Congress, this has been labeled the least productive Congress in history or something like that because we haven't passed as many bills. And I'm like, wow, we had 10 commandments and a Constitution, and for 200 years we've been passing bills, and I haven't seen a lot of improvement on the original documents. So I'm not, I think we work a little too hard sometimes in
You
passing
said it
bills.
best a while ago. Our founding fathers were geniuses.
Yeah, they had it
I mean,
figured
look
out.
what they
were
set up.
inspired. They were inspired, yeah. Wasn't even their own genius.
I fly a Betsy Ross out front of my home. The message is, we need to get back to the basics that our nation was founded on.
Judeo-Christian values.
All right, man, thank you all for your welcome we'll get to you. I want you to know that for those of you that write me, I get thousands of letters and emails and whatnot, and I want you to know I sign every letter back. Personally sign every letter back. Not because I read every one of your letters, but I know what you're writing about, I know what's on your mind, and it's just important.
Thank you. I came to see you last spring in Washington. I didn't have the opportunity to meet with you, but I did do that. And I thought your office was
Sure.